Mike Brown in the house. Pumped about this conversation, my man.
Yeah, I'm super excited to be here. A couple of my favorite dudes and happy to jam.
Yeah, dude, this goes we go way back to all USNA days. This is fun, man.
Yeah, for sure. It's so fun to reconnect with people later in life in a new context, because I think we were all very different people in college and different hopes and dreams, and then coming back now and seeing the work you guys are putting into the world is so cool and warms my little heart. And yeah, so I'm super excited.
Yeah, dude. I got a quick story, and you're a dad, and Goody's obviously the dad. This happened yesterday, and I think you'll get a kick out of this. Do you ever have like this feeling when you're in the house, your kids are around, but they're like nowhere to be seen, and all of a sudden becomes like really, really quiet, and you're like, something's going on here,
It sounds
right?
expensive, is what I usually think.
Yeah, yeah. Oh, so that happened yesterday. Like I'm like doing some chores around the house, and like it all goes quiet. And my son, he's 6, he's a little hellion, and we earlier were talking about like getting haircuts, right? And he was like, "Oh, my hair is kind of in the way," and so I start poking around, and I walk in to our guest bathroom, and there he is. Like he got like his own little like step stool ladder thing, and he's up, and he's got like kids crafting scissors, and he's like mid cut, just like completely cutting his hair. And there's like a huge like bulk of hair in the sink. And it's like all over the place. And I was like, cool, man. Nice work. And he turns around and looks at me. And he's got this big grin on his face. And he literally looked like Dumb and Dumber, dude. Like he cut like way up high, like way, like
Yes.
all the way across.
You little
But then he's
pumpkin
got
pie haircutted freak.
yeah, dude. And so I was like, all right, cool, man. Hey, it looks good. And like I took a picture and sent it to my wife, and she's like, are you gonna go do something about that? I was like, nope, nope. He's going to school like that tomorrow. So yeah, he went to school like that with Dumb and Dumber haircut. It was awesome.
Sometimes you got to learn the hard way, and who's to say that's wrong? Maybe that'll be the new rage, as the short bang haircut.
I just want to warn all our kid listeners out there: if you cut your hair too much, you'll end up like this, which is not bad. Which is not bad. I think bald is beautiful, but I'm just a heads up. Just a heads up.
Yeah, that is an opinion.
That is an opinion.
It's
We've
like
all
your
got them.
opinion.
We've all got them. Hey man, dude, I love it. I found out this morning, Mike. My daughter's my most. I think you've met her, maybe at some of the games, and she's my most responsible. My wife, before I went, I came up from a workout, and my wife's like, Maya, make better decisions. And she found candy. Like there's candy stash. Like I was actually kind of shocked. Like there's candy stashes around her room, and Erica found wrappers in her bed. And I'm like, Erica, this is like our kid's like a little, she's like hiding drugs from us, but it's sugar. She's like having these little binges. And I'm just like, man, parenting is fun, dude. It's fun. And parenting is actually what brought us, Mike, together. I was wearing Navy gear. I think it was maybe Army Navy a few years back, and I was Navied out, and you were just sitting there and you're like, hey, dude. And I'm like, whoa, this is crazy. We ran into each other. Our kids were on the same soccer team, had no idea. We've obviously had not seen each other for 2 decades. And so had no idea we had kids that age or any of that. And I'll tell you, life is awesome because if it wasn't for that Navy gear, we might not have connected right then. I wouldn't have gotten to know your son. Your son now goes to the same elementary school as my boys. And so like I have lunch with your kid because I try to have lunch a couple times a month at the school. And so when I see it's just a special thing, right? It's just cool to see how all that stuff interacts. And so I'm super excited about this conversation because there's so much we can also learn that, that journey, that time gap, you've done a lot. There's a lot that has gone on in our lives. And it's just a beautiful mesh to not only to rekindle that, but also there's a ton you can learn from folks, right? And it's a beautiful journey. So excited.
Yeah, definitely. And it is so cool. I think there's no greater joy than uh parenting and seeing like your friends and kind of having what me and a couple of my guys call tribal fatherhood, which is, hey, not only am I raising my kid, but I'm also partially responsible for raising my friends' kids and like being a positive influence in their life. So I just want to call out and recognize the fact that I really appreciate you. And Lars always tells me the funny stories from lunch, and it's just been really cool.
Yeah, dude. Well, let's get into it, man. So we went to the Naval Academy together, and let's go back a little bit and just tell our audience your story. Who is Mike Brown? What did you do in the past, and now what are you doing now?
Yeah, definitely. So we met in 22nd Company, I think, in somewhere around 2001, and I was not the best midshipman. I had a problem with authority, which turns out, if that's your thing, the Naval Academy may not be the best home for you. And I raged against the machine and believe rules were made to be broken. So I systematically broke every one that I could during the Naval Academy. And that resulted in a less than stellar class rank. I was in the top 95% of the class, and went to Pensacola for flight training and decided, like, I'm never going to let the Navy choose my destiny. Like, in the Navy, your class rank is everything. That's how you get selected into what you're doing. So I said, okay, I graduated at the bottom of the class from the Naval Academy. I'm gonna buckle down. I'm gonna be number one in my class in flight school, so I can pick what I want to do. I want to choose my own destiny. So I worked my ass off and did really well in flight school. Got number one in my class and went into selection. And at the time, I wanted to fly P3s. Land based. Never wanted to be near a ship. Like, I had the whole track lined out. And I told him my selection. He said, "Nope, you're going jets." And I said, "Oh, no, sir, but the number one guys get to pick where they want to go." And he said, "That's right." And the number one guy picks jets. So
So you're determined not to let the Navy, tell you what your future was, but alas.
yeah, best laid plans, right? So I went jets, and it was the best decision that anyone's ever made for me. I really thrived in the fighter squadron. It was a different environment than the Naval Academy, and it really shaped who I am today. And I learned a ton about how to perform at a really high level. I also learned a few things about what not to do. And I always knew two things. I knew I wanted to be in the Navy, and I knew I wanted to be an entrepreneur. So I got out of the Navy after flying jets for a little less than a decade in 2011, and I went to work for a mentor in the oil and gas industry in my hometown. And my family was not particularly well off. We're squarely middle class, but we had a lot of wealthy friends, and this was one of them. And he offered me a job, and he was not a billionaire at the time, but he was making a good run at it. And he was business partners with my uncle and offered me a job. So I went back to my hometown, which was never anywhere I wanted to be, and learned from them for a couple of years, and then started my own firm in 2013.
So, yeah, there's a lot there probably in just that journey. Um, Extend that just a little bit to where like you got into the oil and gas company and you had a partner, right? Also a
Yeah.
Naval Academy grad, also an F-18 pilot.
Yeah.
Where did it go from there?
Yeah. So I started my firm with my best friend from the Navy, Jay Consalvi, and we grew that firm to very quickly, and we can kind of talk about what that journey looked like. But it was when I was joining my original mentor, he said this is the best time in the history of oil and gas to be in oil and gas, and he was right. And so very much, I'm all about increasing your luck surface and saying yes to opportunities when they're presented. And we very much did that. And it was the best time in the history of oil and gas to be there in 2012 in the Permian Basin. And so in many ways, we found success very quickly. We grew that firm to 8 figures in annual revenue and eventually exited in 2019.
Yeah, and one thing before we move forward to, fast forward to what you're doing now and just how you're impacting folks now, I'm curious, what advice can you give to really anybody in transition, but military folks in general? I think a lot of people look at Mike Brown and they don't think that they could necessarily do it, right? Like they don't think that they think that the wall's too high, the bar's too set too high, whatever the excuses that we give ourselves and the mindset. What was it that really helped you get to that next level? That helped you not only transition, all the things that go with that, new identity. I mean, fighter pilot, that's a pretty strong identity, right? Like all naval aviators in and of themselves, like that is a huge thing. But then you take the subset of like fighter pilot, and that's just a whole different thing. It's just a lot deeper. It's a lot more. I imagine that the struggle for identity is significant. And so I was just curious, what was like some of the biggest things that helped you transition from that life into the entrepreneurial life?
Yeah, number one is I loved my time in the Navy. I've said often that, I wouldn't trade that time of my life for any amount of money, and you couldn't give me any amount of money to still be doing it. Uh, you know, I think flying jets as a 20 something is probably the coolest job imaginable. But there was things that I really didn't like. And one of those things was, you know, within the squadron, if you're really good at your job, you just get more work. And if a guy's not good at his job and they check Facebook all day, they're going to take his work and give it to you. And all you get as a reward for that is just like a thumbs up and maybe a medal at the end of your tour and a good recommendation, to go do the same thing at the next place. And I just found that insanely frustrating. Basically high performance is rewarded by more work, and that's it. What really what attracted me to entrepreneurship is the fact that high performance is rewarded with money, which is a way better reward than a thumbs up. And so, I always had this idea that like I wanted to start a company and really, kind of in some ways like see what I was made of and see if I really had what it took to be successful. And I wanted the responsibility of looking in the mirror every day and going, whatever happens today, that's on me. If I make money today, that's on me. If I don't make money today, that's on me. Like I really love that challenge. And I think what makes it difficult for military guys and gals to take that leap is it can like comfort can be addicting, and getting a paycheck every 2 weeks, no matter what happens, even if you have to work hard and you just get that thumbs up, like that paycheck really becomes addicting. And so when it's time to transition, a lot of folks look at that and they go, hey, especially if they're kind of at that retirement place, like, hey, I can just get my retirement forever. I can go get another job and stack on that. And I can stick to what I know because I've done this for 20 years. And it really ends up being easy to just transition into that comfort. And I think that's fine for a lot of folks, right? Like if that's what you want, if you're optimizing for something like comfort, and you want to spend time with your family and you want to, do something that like that's perfectly reasonable. But I would say if you have that urge or itch to like, choose a different path, go all in and be responsible for your own destiny, there's no greater path to go down. And really, like if you want to push yourself and become the best version of yourself, like entrepreneurship is the greatest personal development school that I've ever found. And so, you know, like I said, not for everybody, certainly, but I would just say the question to ask yourself is, am I addicted to comfort, or is there an opportunity here for me to really go for it?
So you grew up kind of middle of the road, not wealthy living, uh, you know, probably had some type of money mindset, right? Come to the Naval Academy, get a free education, 10 years in the Navy, you get out and you become, you know, quote unquote successful in the money world very quickly.
Yeah.
And you exit an 8-figure business. Um, I'm just, I know your story, so let's go there. Um, I'm curious, like about the money mindset and how it can either help you or impact you in different ways. And on your website, you help entrepreneurs through pitfalls that often accompany success, right? What are some of these pitfalls that accompany success, and what are some of this mindset towards money that comes from like early on in life, right?
Yeah, great question. Tons to unpack there, but it really does start with my own journey. So once I sold in 2019, I thought I would never be unhappy again. Like I had done all the things I was supposed to do in life. I'd gone to the Naval Academy, tested myself in combat, founded a company, successfully exited that company. Like I had checked all the boxes that society lays out for us that tells us that's how you achieve happiness. Like I did it. I beat the video game. And 2 years later, I was so stressed out and overwhelmed. There was days I didn't even want to get out of bed in the morning. And so like a good fighter pilot, I'm going, okay, how did I get here? How did I go from, you know, selling my company for millions of dollars to more stressed out than I've ever been? Like something is broken. And what is that thing? And so I went on a deep dive, coaching, therapy, like various modalities to figure out like how did I end up here? And I found out that you know there is a lot of good advice in this world about money, and there's a reason that we don't take it, and that is centered around our stories around money and the patterns that we grew up with, and replaying those show up in our adult life. And so I found a couple of deep patterns. Number one is that I was addicted to risk, and the reason I was addicted to risk is we kind of look at some neuroscience here. If you have a driven personality type, which the three of us do, and I imagine many people listening do, you have a couple of things, either the D2 or D4 gene and high levels of neuropeptide Y. And what that means in layman's terms is that when we're faced with a chaotic situation, rather than go into fight, flight, or freeze, which is what normal people would engage in, we actually find calm in the chaos and we go into hyper focus mode. And this is where our highest performance comes out. And this is a really useful evolutionary adaptation, right? Especially going in the military or going into entrepreneurship, like finding calm in the chaos is what allows us to succeed, except for when we're safe. And what happens is when we're safe, we actually will manufacture chaos. We will throw a wrench into the mechanism and self-sabotage and create chaos so we can find that level of high performance. And that's exactly what I was doing. So anytime my bank account would start to fill up, I would go invest in new deals, risk it all, and drain my bank account as soon as I possibly could in order to go put my back against the wall and elicit that high performance. Because if my bank account was full, like I wasn't going to work very hard and I knew it. So subconsciously, I'm deploying all my capital as fast as I can to get back to that feeling of pressure in order to perform. So that was the first story that I needed to unwind. The second one was deeper. And that is growing up, I said I was squarely middle class. I would actually say we were kind of lower middle class for a while. The oil business was no place to be in the late or mid to late 90s. And when we were growing up, I remember my dad driving this 1985 Pontiac Bonneville. It had thumbtacks in the roof to keep the headliner up. It had some rust colorations. We called it the Brown Bomb. And I was so embarrassed by this car. Like I couldn't understand why my dad would drive such a shitty car. And like now I recognize like there was 5 kids in the family. Like my dad was working his ass off. And, I really, truly appreciate the sacrifice he was making. But my 13-year-old brain didn't understand that, right? And I remember during those times, like my parents would fight every night. I would watch the 2 people I love the most on the planet fight every night, and they only fought about one thing: money, right? And so I said, when I grow up, I'm going to make enough money that I never have to worry about money. And so I did. And right. And like, again, this is a really powerful motivator. Like this was the driving force behind going to the Naval Academy and starting a company and like all of these things that made me successful. But unfortunately, my child brain equated worrying about money with being responsible with money. Right. So I just had this easy come, easy go, freewheeling attitude. The more I made, the more I would spend, the more I would invest. And I never worried about money. And that resulted in me getting in this, really critical situation after making a life-changing amount of money where I never should have had to work again. Right. So when I talk about money stories, these are the money stories that determine our behavior. They're subconscious programming running in the background. They have to do with either our childhood or early adolescence, or even things that happen to us early in adulthood. So like, a bankruptcy could result in someone having a deep ingrained pattern about how they relate to money later on. So those are the subconscious things that are driving our behavior. We love to think that we're rational, but the fact is, our brains are pattern matching machines, and they're only designed to do one thing, and that's keep us safe. So what we witness turns into subconscious programming that is designed to keep us safe and keep us from repeating the mistakes of the past.
Yeah, I love that. And it's super powerful. And I appreciate you sharing it. And I'm curious, like, let's talk tactics now, right? So how can we address these things? And I say these things really, I guess it could be summed up in our money mindset. How can we address it in a healthy manner before it becomes a reaction or before we're in faced with crisis or dilemma? How can we be proactive in addressing this and also unlocking our greatest potential and highest calling, right? How do we do that in a way that does not require us to, you know, assume such risk or potentially just live in a state of unhappiness?
Yeah. How can we shortcut the process? And we can't, is the great news. So basically the key is personal development and introspection. And if I had to say like the one thing that really changed my life more than anything else, post military, was finding the world of personal development and coaching and therapy and like diving deep to understand ourselves. And it's not easy work. And most people look at that and go, "Oh, I'm not sure if I want to do that. I don't want to open that can of worms. I'm not sure if that's for me." And that's because it can be really scary to dive into. But I guarantee what you find on the other side of that is what drives you to become the best version of yourself. And there is so much for you sitting on the other side of what you're afraid of in diving into those things. So what I like to do is characterize it as what I call the AI loop, which is awareness, insight, action, and integration. And awareness means, okay, I'm aware of this pattern that's coming up. So I'm aware that I have this freewheeling attitude with money, this easy come, easy go mindset. So I'm aware that I have an issue here. The second step is insight, which is, okay, where does this come from? Okay, so that's diving back into my childhood and going, okay, I see, watching my parents fight, creating this idea that I would never have to worry about money. That's where this thing comes from. And what tends to happen is we love to get stuck in the insight place. We love to like mine our childhood and go back and go, oh, and it feels really good it feels like we're unlocking something when we realize where some of this stuff came from. But the third step is the most critical, and that's action. Okay. So if I find myself falling into this pattern, what am I going to do to arrest that pattern in the moment and then repattern, take some sort of action? And when I do that enough times, that's how I get to integration. That's how I repattern my brain and create a new habit pattern that becomes second nature, replacing that old subconscious programming. So that action step is the most important. And there's a few ways we can go about this. An action might be very tactical. So, for this case, we're talking about my high risk, high reward mindset. An action might be when I'm about to make an investment, go, hey, let me look at an overall picture of my finances and let me take a step back for a minute and go, is this really serving me? What's my goal here? And does this fit overall in the picture? So giving myself some frameworks and systems within which to operate. So that's one way. Or it could be more introspective, going, okay, how old is this? What am I really trying to do here? And what is driving this behavior at a core level? So you can kind of go from a systems standpoint or an emotional standpoint, and either one of those, and maybe you're doing both, to create action steps to snap out of that pattern and repattern and integrate a new behavior into your life.
So how does this intertwine with family life? Like how does this failure or success impact you know this idea of a balanced life? You had a wife and kids, and you know a lot of the entrepreneurs are in the hustle, the grind, burn the candle lights at both ends. Like how does that impact family?
Yeah. Well, I love this question, and this is really near and dear to my heart because I believe that hard work is the greatest lie ever told. So our whole lives, we hear from well-meaning parents, teachers, and coaches like, work hard and you'll be successful. But the problem is it's not true, because if it was true, there would be 7 billion rich people on this planet, because everybody is engaged in backbreaking labor, working their ass off. And I believe it's actually one of the most condescending, insensitive things a wealthy person can say to someone who's struggling is, well, just work harder and you'll be successful, because everybody's working hard. So there must be some other factor to success, right? And that factor is leverage. Leveraging our time, leveraging our risk, leveraging our resources, leveraging our wealth. Like, leverage is how we break out of the grind and become successful. And then number two is defining what success really is and what it means. So, when I work with folks or work with entrepreneurs in this new phase, the first thing we want to do is define what it is we actually value. And so when we're talking about wealth, my definition of wealth is freedom. Okay. Most people start with some kind of definition around money, but as we dive a level deeper, what wealth really means to most folks is freedom. So for me, it's freedom of time, freedom of relationships, freedom of health, and freedom of mind. Those four things are what comprise wealth for me. And so money at that point just becomes a tool in order to achieve freedom. So money for me gives me a tool to leverage to buy back my time and invest with my family. Right? So for me, the only reason to grow a business and be successful is to disengage from having to grind for money. And now I get to invest in experiences with my family, right? I get to spend time with my kids in the way I want to. I get to leverage that success in order to live that ideal calendar or the way that I want to live and serve my values.
Dude, it's I've got I'm trying to scroll this digital notepad to get capture these notes, and I'll tell you one of the things you said, rewinding, you talked about the AI loop, and that process is hard. That is hard work, right? And the idea that just purely hard work is a lie, to success, quote unquote success. But I think what's fascinating to me is it's I don't want our listeners to be to think, Mike Brown went to Nail Academy, crushed it, had this amazing relationship with his best friend, and they started a business and 8 figures, and then the family life was amazing. Like, dude, you've had some serious struggles, right? Like, and I'll say you have been a significant influence to me. Namely, one of the things that we took action on, that a conversation that may have been meaningful to you or not, was the journey that you went through with your business partner, that effectively drove us to bring somebody in and analyze and have us, like, no kidding, sit down and have hard conversations before it ever got to a place that it's truly hard. But have somebody come in and analyze and be like, okay, these are the things like that I see from an outsider, and here's where your relationships, here's some pitfalls, here's some things. And so I want to make sure, like, our listeners aren't lulled into this idea that this has been easy for you, or that there has been just everything's been handed to you, right? Like, this is not the case. And if you don't mind, just a little bit of vulnerability, talking through some of those challenges and how you came out of them. Because it just like defining success, I think defining hard work is also, I think a lot of us are like, I'm willing to, I will grind. I will grind if that means I'll make money. But then it's like, hey, dude, have you asked yourself, like, what you're really grinding for? Like, that in and of itself is hard work, right? Ask yourself hard questions to dig into redefining success. Like, all those things, self-awareness, acknowledging, the AI loop, awareness, insight, action, integration, that is hard work, but it just is a different type, and it has huge ramifications. So all that being said, if you don't mind, relieving us of the burden of thinking that Mike's just, you're just touched and special, and there's no challenge in that.
Yeah, just Midas touch the whole way, right? No, I appreciate that, and I think that it can be easy to skip over some of the hard things, because we all love a good hero's journey, right? We all love a success story, and I talk often about survivorship bias. Like, when we see people that have knocked it out of the park, we forget about the distribution of outcomes and the fact that for every one of those guys who's being interviewed on a podcast, like, there's 1,000 other guys doing the right things behind the scenes that never made it to that level, right? And so, number one, a lot of what happens, there's a luck factor involved, and the other piece is that entrepreneurship is really, really hard. And the only way to succeed is to just never get knocked out of the game, right? So you can take setbacks, but you got to make sure that those setbacks don't wash you out completely, right? And so a lot of it comes down to hedging risk and making sure when I'm swinging for the fences or when I'm taking these big bets that I have some sort of safety net, or making sure that this isn't going to end me financially or in a relationship or otherwise, right? And so, one of the biggest mistakes I see people making is that sacrifice, that the believing that hard work is the only way to be successful, and they sacrifice their relationships with their family or with their kids or their spouse or whatever, in name of some imaginary destination. And that is a huge trap. And the fact is, like, I exited my company. I also exited a marriage at that time. I got married when I was young, and didn't have the tools that I have now to build a successful relationship, right? And over time, that resulted in that first marriage failing. That was an incredibly difficult period of my life, and contributed to a lot of that stress. And we can talk about co-parenting and some of the harder things about divorce. But that was super difficult. And then I had the privilege of starting my company with my best friend, and we had an amazing relationship and would talk about hard things. And even despite all of that, like, being a 50-50 partner is hard. And if you're not tending to the work on the relationship, resentments can start to build. And even things that you didn't know you had, like residing in that subconscious. And so as we kind of got to the end of our company, we actually ended up sitting with Esther Perel, who is probably one of the best therapists on the planet, and unwinding some of the things that had been challenging in our relationship. And it was wild. Like, and again, that stuff isn't easy to go through. But we had a period where we weren't getting along very well, and like, and I think this is a natural evolution when maybe you've been on the same page for 7, 8, 10 years, and all of a sudden, as we both grow and evolve, like, we start to want different things. And there's no right or wrong here. It just is like, hey, difference of direction, right? And this can happen in marriages, this could happen in business partnerships. And I think it's easy to just go, oh yeah, cool, well, let's just go our separate ways. The hard work is, okay, let's find a way to compromise on what it is we do want. Let's talk about what's important to us and why, and really go that level deeper of, like, how do I truly understand the other person's point of view here? And again, that means you have to answer hard questions about yourself. Like, how am I showing up to this relationship?
So that's David and I. So we are 50-50 partners on everything, pretty much. We were college roommates for 4 years, best friends, best men in each other's weddings. Um, and there are days where we don't like each other very much. Like, there are days when we are frustrated with each other. There are days when I honestly just want to shut down and not talk to him, right?
Totally.
So, mentor us here a little bit, like, and for anyone else listening in a similar situation, like, what are the action steps? What do we do to ensure that our relationship stays strong? And maybe that could be in marriage too, right? And we're in financial marriage, we're in business marriage.
Yeah.
Like, there is a lot that we share in common. But that could also be in, husband and wife situation. Like, what does someone do to ensure that they don't part ways, right? And keep the relationship the most important thing in their life.
Yeah. Number one, I would say that just even understanding that there is work to be done, right? Like, we are not taught how to cultivate long-term relationships, because the fact is, like, love isn't enough, and like, partnership isn't enough. And I don't mean that in a negative way. It's just like, we're kind of pitched this fairy tale view of marriage or partnership or whatever it may be. And like, that's just simply not the case. And so we have to look at, the two people as individuals. Like, and then the two people as a union. And that relationship also needs tending. And I don't like work. I like to think of it as gardening. Like, people who have gardens are obsessed with their gardens and they love going out to weed their gardens, and like it's kind of a passion project for them. That's how I like to think of relationships. When people say relationships are hard work, I like to go, yeah, maybe, but hard work with joy. Like, this is something I want to tend to and make sure that it's growing and cultivating. So you have to work on the relationship as as the two of you in a union, but you also have to work on yourselves as individuals, right? And how am I showing up to the relationship? So the first thing that the first really hard question is, what am I bringing to this relationship? What am I bringing to this interaction? How could I be showing up better? Am I showing up with understanding and compassion and a clear vision of what I'm contributing to my piece? So what's my piece in all of this, right? So anytime there's a conflict, the best place to look first is inward and go, hey, am I showing up with a victim mentality here? Am I making up a story? I love the 4 agreements. It's on one of my recommended reading lists. And I think the second agreement is don't take it personally, right? So I've got a great little anecdote about this. I posted something like right when I was starting to build my personal brand and posting online. I posted this kind of vulnerable share about kind of the wild ride I'd had, and like a couple hours or a day later, one of my friends posts this thing. It's like, oh, I don't understand all these people that are posting online about losing money. Like, I've never lost any money. What's wrong with them? And I was like, damn, like that hurt. Like, it was like a dagger right to the heart. Like clearly this dude took what I wrote and kind of clowned me a little bit. And like building a personal brand is terrifying in the first place. And then you get like hate from someone that you kind of respect, and you're like, oh, and it didn't bother me for a while. I mean, months, like maybe over a year. And then I posted something else way later, and this same person was like, "Oh my god, I love Mike's takes on stuff. Mike's great. You guys should all go follow him." And this is amazing. And I realized, like, oh man, that post probably had nothing to do with me. Like, who knows if this guy even read the original thing? And I made up this whole story that he was shitting on me online, and that and I carried all this shame, and it turns out like this guy's actually a friend and a fan, and it was all in my head from the get go, right? And the same thing happens in our relationships, right? Whether it's husband and wife or work partners, we call it the dirty fridge. So you think about like all the things you don't want to do in your company, right? Whether it's admin work or organizational work, like the stuff that nobody likes to do. We always make up a story why the other person's not doing it, right? Rather than going, why am I not cleaning out the fridge? Like, oh yeah, my wife never cleans out the fridge because she doesn't like me, and I'm busy at work earning the money, and we have all these great narratives, and they go, well, why don't you get off your ass and go clean that fridge out, right? And so what I like to do with business partnerships is ask, and maybe the two of you, like, hey, what's the dirty fridge work that nobody wants to do, and what story are you making up as to why the other person's not doing it? Let's start there.
Yeah, dude. That's I love
I have
that.
a laundry list. No.
Yeah, he does. He does. None of them have his name next to it. No, I'm just kidding. And I'll tell you what's been, to your point, and for anybody desiring to enter partnerships, I think it's critical to do this, right? Before we ever did a deal, I mean, we literally like played through a bunch of scenarios that were all negative, had negative outcomes. And what does this do to our friendship? What does this do to our relationships? Is this something we're willing to endure? Is it something we're willing to risk? And just play it out, right? And made agreements through that process of like, hey, if like I totally understand if some other great opportunity comes up and you need to take that because it's good for you and your family. And I commit now to not being, well, I commit now to, if I feel resentment, I will share that. But I also commit to understanding and trying not to have resentment towards this amazing opportunity to celebrate you, to be happy for you. Now, there's a little bit of kumbaya on that, and of course, there's things to work through. But I'll tell you the part that's not kumbaya, and we do this, and it's important knowing your personalities and your role. Like Stu is a classic, like he would be more comfortable in um if there's conflict between us, he would be the guy that's way more comfortable in like doing the silent treatment and letting that endure for eternity. And I'm like very, very much like, in my marriage and my friendships, like, hey, is there something going on? Like, let's talk about it right now. But and the downside of that, right, is that once we have that conversation, like my wife informed me the other day, she was upset with me for a number of days about this thing that I said, but to me it was said, it was resolved and moved on. I didn't even think about it again. So I guess my point is important. I see my role also as I start to sense like, okay, like I did it the other day when this dude's off. I'm like, hey, I sense that there's some resentments. There's some things going on. Like, I think we should, is this me or are there things we need to talk about? And I don't remember the result. Just
Case
true
in
to
point. I
personality.
love it.
Case in point. I don't remember exactly what if there were things that had to be resolved or not. But in my mind, they've been resolved because we brought it up and moved forward, right? But it's just knowing each other, giving each other permission and grace. But also sometimes you have to step up and live in the strength no matter how uncomfortable it was. It's not like I was super comfortable going to his office and be like, hey, dude, like this is my sense. Cause sometimes people are like, dude, I don't want to talk about it. And I know that. But there's also, and then there's grace and being like, okay, I'll let you give you space, analyze, and then that, still come back with some things that I never thought about, right? Or chose to just move on from. And so there's strengths in both of them, but it's, I love the idea of no kidding. Again, it goes back to your willingness. How badly do you want to grow the relationship, the business, the thing, to put in the work to not to make money, but to avoid like a catastrophic breakup of our marriage or
Yeah.
whatever that looks like. And I think it's critical before you go into partnerships to really do that. But there's also a huge blessing in partnerships. They're more, to me, I have zero desire to be a solopreneur. I have zero desire to build a business on my own. Zero. Like I just won't do it because it's so much fun to do it with others, right? But there's just these things that you have to be willing to have these conversations. And I would argue for us and for me specifically, finding Mike Browns, right? Finding the people and like, let's get into what you do now. You touched on it. He coached people, but dude, you like coach high level individuals into like beyond the, just the money making aspects of a business, the X's and O's. There's a relational element that you're heavy into. And let's talk about what you're doing now, right? Let's segue into that because I think the thing that anybody listening could do in any aspect of their life, whether it's your marriage, your relationships, your businesses, is get around somebody, hire a coach, pay for, invest in yourself to have to be, to get on the path that you truly want to be, because there are people that have walked that path and they could short circuit that for you.
That's beautifully said, my friend. Yeah, I mean, one of the best investments I've ever made is in coaching for myself. And ultimately going down that rabbit hole led me to become a coach myself. I started coaching entrepreneurs in 2018 after doing a lot of angel investing and mentoring founders. I found that I really enjoyed that work and started kind of as a general business coach. And then as I continued down that path, realized what I really liked was the deeper level of introspective work that we kind of touched on. And so, kind of evolved from, giving straight P&L advice into a more holistic approach. And I truly believe that there are very few business problems. I used to say there are no business problems. There are only personal problems. There are a few business problems, like catastrophic economic downturn. That's not a you problem. That's a business problem. But for the most part, when problems show up in our business, it's usually a personal limitation that we're bumping up against, and it can be solved from an introspective, emotional healing type level. And so, that's what I'm really passionate about now. And where that's evolved into is, again, born of my own journey and the trials and tribulations I went through post exit. Now my practice has evolved into a wealth coaching practice. So I teach people exactly what we've been talking about, how to use your wealth as a tool to create a life of freedom that you never have to retire from. And that's what I'm passionate about now. And so it's really a two-pronged approach. There's the tactical and strategic, and that's what everybody wants. Like, hey, what are the best tax tips and strategies? How do I make passive income? And all of that's core to what we do. But really what I want to talk about first is the foundational work of like, what's your relationship to money? why do you want to create this success and create this passive income? What are you going to use it to build? Who can you impact? What kind of a life do you want to design? And then let's marry those two together and create a plan to get there. But it's driven from impact, not just from some subconscious place of like, I want to feel successful.
What's the difference between an entrepreneur and an investor?
Great
You
question.
write a lot about
That's right.
this a lot.
You just tee them up and I'll knock them down.
Boom.
I sent an email about this a few weeks ago, and great shameless plug here. If you like what I'm talking about today, you want to learn more, join my newsletter at unbreakablewealth.com/newsletter. Sign up. I send a weekly, completely free newsletter focused on personal finance and really decision making. And so what Stu's asking about is the difference in an entrepreneur and an investor. I've always considered myself an investor. And the difference is an entrepreneur has this earn the boats, like I'll forge ahead in the face against all odds, no matter what mentality. And that is exactly what makes them successful. Whereas an investor goes, hey, I only need to win more times than I lose. And I'm going to take a bunch of bets and recognize that some of those bets are going to be losing, some of them are going to be winning. And I want to optimize decision making to win more than I lose. And those are two very different mindsets. But the fact is, we can all exist somewhere along that spectrum. And so what I try to help entrepreneurs do is go, hey, yes, you need that determination, burn the boats, internal fortitude, like move forward at all costs. But let's temper that with some investor mindset and go, hey, am I allocating my resources in the right place? Like, am I going all in on the right things, or could I reallocate and shift and make better decisions, kind of leaning on that investor framework? And so kind of bringing one to the other, I think is a really important skill.
Dude, I love that, man. I just looked at the time and I'm like, oh man, I could go for hours with you. And I'll tell you, I just want our audience to know, I have invested time, and I'm so grateful for Mike because he's invested back in us. When we met for lunch, it's never a lunch, right? I think our lunches or our coffee. I think you and I recently had a coffee date that lasted 2.5 to 3 hours. But it's fascinating to me and I love it. And I just want to absolutely highlight, and they'll be in our show notes, links to your coaching program, to your newsletter, all the things you do. But what I will say is that, dude, you're such a generous person with your knowledge, with your skills, and your love to help others is so obvious, so apparent. And I just want to express gratitude to you, man, that you probably don't realize the level of influence you have. When we sit down, whether I'm taking, copious actual notes or taking mental notes and things that we need to do in our conversations, but Stu and I always leave those conversations like, okay, these are the action items we need to take advantage of, these are the things we need to do. Mike said that we should explore this thing, so we need to take action on that, right? And I would just say, take this opportunity to thank you, because it's really cool to see when it's obvious too, when dudes are all about giving back and when they're about helping others to lift them up, right? And I would even say, like, some of the things we do are by the world standards would potentially be, in competition, these masterminds and growing folks, but it's never thought of that way. It's just a purely abundant mindset. And dude, I've learned a ton from you, man. It's awesome to have seen your journey. It's awesome to now, play football and hang out and have lunch with your kids, or with your kid, with your son, Lars. But just, I would encourage folks not only to look at your stuff, to get that free newsletter. It's a free newsletter with a ton of value, but also find your Mike Browns, right? Find the people to surround yourself with that will help you project you and really pour rocket fuel on the efforts you're making to get to where you want to be. And it's way more about money. It's about success, true success, doing that hard work, defining it, and actually pursuing the life that, the person that you want to become. So, dude, you're amazing. I absolutely freaking love the fact that we connected again, that it was a purely by the grace of God on the side of a soccer field in Rooney Ranch, or whatever that field is called, Rooney soccer fields. And for me, it was complete destiny. It was awesome, man. So thank you.
Well, I feel that. Thank you. And I appreciate the kind words, because, for me, it really is all about how do I take this hard-earned wisdom, and it was hard-earned, right? Like you guys touched on it. Like, I went through some painful things to get to where I am, and it isn't all sunshine and rainbows. And I do think we have this tendency in our society to gloss over the hard parts of what it takes to become successful. And so if I can share that with people, right? If I can help them shortcut some of the pain, or at least become aware of some of these problems in a faster manner than I did without having to go through all of that, like that's the conversation I want to have. Like that's what I'm here to do. And my friend Dan, who's also one of my mentors, loves to say, what we're put on this planet to do is become the best version of ourselves and then share that with others. And so that mission really resonates with me. Is like, hey, I'm going to do all of this hard work. I'm never going to ask a client or a friend to do the work I'm not willing to do myself, right? But as I step into that, we can all help each other level up and hold each other accountable and shine a light on the areas that we maybe don't want to look at. And like, to me, that's what's so valuable about relationships like this. So I really appreciate the way you guys show up. I love what you're bringing to the world. And I'm just so honored to call the two of you friends.
Yeah, right back at you, buddy. I appreciate you, man. I will make a second plug for Mike Brown's newsletter. I read it every single Friday. I get tips and tricks on the best hoodie to wear, the best book to read, the best shoes, and then also some pretty powerful mindset stuff. So, Mike, tell people where else we can find you besides your newsletter.
Yeah, I've invested a lot into Instagram over the last year. It's my favorite platform. So at mbrown.co, follow me on Instagram. And then yeah, if you want to check out my coaching programs, it's at unbreakablewealth.com. I offer one-on-one coaching, as well as I have a really awesome group program for people looking to bridge that gap between wealth and freedom, like we talked about. Some really high-level folks in there. And just have really built an incredible community that I'm super proud to be a part of. Much less kind of be the lighthouse there. So yeah, love to connect with anybody. Hit me up on Instagram and over to my website and newsletter.
Awesome, man. Well, we'll put all that in the show notes. Guys and gals, reach out to Mike. He's a pretty cool dude. Mike, thanks, man. Guys and gals, go take uncommon action.
Appreciate it,
See ya.
fellas.
Thanks, brother.